The name John Thompson, U.S. Army Reserve, 59 to 65, around there. The 6 year, the 6 month service type thing, and then 6 months active, 5.5 in the reserves. You know. The Vietnam War hadn't really gotten going, but it was obvious that people were being called, and I was actually on a waiting list for the Marine Corps, but I fell in love, and I selfishly didn't want to go away. And a buddy of mine, he said, well, the guy he worked for was forming a company, you know, an Army company, and so I joined that, you know. But the top rank was a buck sergeant, just wire team chief and a radio operator. The old was the 102nd Infantry Division, you know. We used to joke that we're only one number off from the 101st. We got to be good, you know. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. Kelly approached me and we were talking, and I said, well, I'm not technically a veteran, you know. And I says, I have no stories of heroics or anything, you know. When we got talking, and I says, but I did meet some interesting people. One guy in particular that really, you know, got to me, you know. In basic training, you know, I couldn't find my hat, you know. And the guy said, pointed it to this guy, and he did it, you know. And the guy, he had pulled a few other tricks in that, and I just grabbed hold of him and said, you give me my hat, or I'm going to put you, beat the heck out of you, you know. And a fellow named Tony Ramirez came up behind me and says, Jack, not now. They'll take it out on the whole group. They're looking for an excuse, you know. He says, I got an extra hat. Let me get it for you. And we'll take care of Junior later, you know. Well, we fall into formation, you know, and I just happen to glance off to the side, and there's Tony, and there ain't no hat, you know. And he's just going, you know, shh. And the sergeant went ape, you know. He had him running around calisthenics and that. The only thing I noted is the guy didn't tire, and he wouldn't quit. I think the sergeant finally gave up, you know. And afterwards, I went over to thank him, you know, and I says, I owe you one, you know. I said, that was special. And that was it, you know. And then our last night of camp, I think just because we were 6-monthers, well, 2 of the sergeants were drunker than a skunk. And they started playing games with us. Bring down your footlocker, put on your summer uniform, all sorts of things. And this went on for several hours, and they're laughing, you know, until at one point, well, the guy was stupid on his part, but he was supposed to have a certain uniform on under the winter coat, and he didn't have that uniform. And the sergeant gut punched him. I mean, a bad one, you know. You know. And we went back to the barracks, and Tony came over. He said, Jack, this has got to stop. He says, I'm going to talk to them. Will you back me? He said, once before you said, I owed you one. I said, I do. He says, well, you don't have to say anything, you know, but this has to stop. And he had a command presence about him, you know. I said, Tony, yeah, I'll be a witness, but if they start beating on you, I'm not going to stand there and watch you take a beating. I says, that way there'll be 2 guys who got beat up maybe, but you know. And so, and he confronted them calmly, coolly as could be. And well, I never know what happened to them. I'm sure minimally they lost their stripes, you know, as they damn well should have, pardon my language. So Tony, we were both from St. Louis. We went to different high schools, opposing high schools, and that. But he went off to Fort Sam Houston. We kept in contact, you know. And I asked him, how you doing down at Fort Sam Houston? He says, I'm playing tennis. I didn't know at the time, but he was a ranked tennis player, University of Houston. He says, I'm the General's tennis player. He says, the General's a great guy, you know. He said, but this isn't why I joined, you know. And sometime later, not too long later, I talked to him. I said, what's up? He says, well, he says, the General spotted the fact that I wasn't really happy. And he says, you know, Ramirez, what's your problem, you know? And he says, sir, I didn't join to play tennis. I said, no offense, you know. He says, well, I can get you out of here real quick. You know, he was the commanding general of the post. He said, but one thing you got to do. He says, what's that, sir? You got to go to OCS. And he did that, you know. And we kept in touch and that, and then suddenly couldn't reach him or anything. I figured, well, probably Vietnam, you know. And I didn't see him. It's a good 5 years later, until 5 years later, I was attending an orientation program as I entered law school. And I heard a guy holler out, hey, Jackson. I turned around, and it's Tony. He's 1 year ahead of me in school. Yeah, he was an officer, you know, and that. But he didn't say much about that. He said, yeah, I was over there, you know, and the next night I had my reserve meeting, you know, and I'm outside. It was the annual affair. You had dress uniforms, the whole thing, you know, and I'm outside with my guys and, you know, having a smoke. And up the steps comes this officer, you know, and I give him the salute. And he looks up, he's a Green Beret, Tony. The guy's got, his medals have medals, you know. And yeah, then we went out that night, and you know, and he really he just impressed the heck out of me. And getting out of law school, they weren't eager to hire a Mexican. That's the truth of the matter at the time. You know, he was getting turned down. That guys who were not good enough to shine his shoes, you know. But he hung in there, and then when there was heavy immigration started coming about, he specialized in that, and his family, he had connections in Mexico, so he did quite well, you know. But then again, I went off to work for Uncle Sam, and then we lost touch. A couple of years later, I went back to St. Louis. I'm walking down the street. Once again, hey, Jackson, you know, he was walking down the street. That's when he gave me the update on how things were going, you know. And then I permanently left St. Louis, and I often wondered about him. Oh, another, maybe 10 years later, I read in the Alumni magazine, he had died, Agent Orange. But that was the most impressive human being I ever saw, and they're rare like that, you know. And then I went to work for the government, Uncle Sam, and I met similar guys with, you know, guys would be talking, and they'd find out Silver Star, Navy Cross winners, and I said, oh, you know, but just decent people, and you realize that there's a special breed out there. There's guys who are a cut above the rest of us, you know, and it was a privilege to know him, you know. And I've met a few other guys like that who have, you know, well, they blew the whistle and they showed up, and I think that's the best anyone can do in anything, any situation.
I know you say that, but the fact that you did serve in peacetime is just as important as in wartime.
Well, thank you. Well, it's a symbol of what those men have sacrificed, you know, and what we've got, we better keep, you know, and we better be willing to back that up.